Hi, everyone. Day 2 of TechEd, unless you went to the pre-con. We're looking at day 3. Hope everyone's having a good time. The sun is out in Boston. That's a great thing. I was here last week as well, and it was pouring rain. So I'm glad you all came to this talk. I'm a little tizzy. For some reason, I had my timing wrong, so I apologize for the wet hair, but it's going to be a great talk. I have all my demos ready. I think we'll be okay. And it's material I've covered for over a year, and it's something I feel really passionate about, so I think we'll do fine. So today we're going to talk about mobile PCs and developing applications for mobile PCs. And by mobile PCs, I mean laptops and tablets, the new ultra-mobile PC, portable devices running a full OS, running XP and Vista. We'll take a look at what that platform is, what the numbers are, where the motivation is for developers to think about this platform. I'll look at what features make up a great mobile PC application: pen and ink, network awareness, power awareness, data synchronization, things that can keep your customer productive in a mobile environment. Those are great features to have in a mobile application. Then we'll look at the lifestyle PC. That's what they're calling this new ultra-mobile PC. They're calling this a lifestyle PC because they see it as different, differentiating it from a notebook or a laptop, that this is something you can shove in your gym bag and take with you places that you might not take that. So just to look at the numbers, in case you don't know, I mean, you can figure out most of this anecdotally. If you look at your friends and your family and your coworkers, most of them are buying laptops now, even if there's not a compelling need for them to need one, like they're not travelers or mobile workers. They probably have a wireless network in their house, and they see the need even just to move from one room to another. It's a lot... just a nicer device to be able to move it, to take it to coffee shops, to do things like that. So as a result, we're seeing large growth in the notebook sales. So it's growing 15% every year. Whereas desktops, with an average of 4% growth, is actually going to go into the negative. Desktop sales are going to start to decline, while laptop sales will increase. And more by 2008, half of new computers sold will be notebooks. So that's something to think about when you're developing software, that there's a 50% chance that your software is going to run on a portable device. Something that, relies on battery, goes in and out of network connections, things like that. So as I said, it's a changing world out there. There are new opportunities and new places to use computers where you've never used them before. And it's great. There's great opportunity as a result of this. We can start to get more connected, more productive. You can figure out, collaborate in new scenarios. With Vista, you're going to be able to go into a conference room at a company where you can't get on the corporate network, and you can still collaborate and create an ad hoc peer-to-peer network and communicate with your coworkers that you've brought in. And this is our big, theme, is to stay connected, more effective, entertainment, data anywhere, and obviously safe and secure all along. So these are features you need to consider when writing applications that work great on a mobile PC. There are new scenarios that can come in, especially when you think about lifestyle. You start to think about applications that can work in almost a totally different way when disconnected from a desktop environment. So as I said, when I talk about mobile PCs, there's a kind of a continuum of devices. There's what we call the luggables, the desktop replacements, which are large, powerful machines, weigh close to 10 pounds sometimes. They're very heavy, and they're productive, and they're fast, and they have everything you'd want in a desktop. And they are portable, depending on rotator cuff issues and strength, but you can get these around in and out of airplanes. And they're as performant as desktop applications. There's no differentiating. Even laptops now come, dual core, 4 gigs of RAM and Vista. I mean, you can get some powerful tablet portable machines, desktop replacements. And then we go into the mobile and the ultra-portable, or like the under 4-pound devices, and then the ultra-mobile PC. This weighs under 2 pounds. It has only a 7-inch display. It has touch, no keyboard. So you can USB a keyboard in, but when you take it out of your bag and you're doing quick, there are thumb keys and things like that you can use to type, and you can touch and do things like that. Hold on. So there's also a continuum outside of mobile PCs, right? Your consumers, your end users, see the continuum starting with the smartphone and going to the desktop replacement portable device. So although developers may understand that there's vast differences between these, almost anyone in the computer industry would know that, that's a very different device. Your end user doesn't see that much of a difference. They see always connected devices, accessing data from anywhere. And so they start to expect for the ultra-mobile PCs and the full OSs to respond like their phone. They want it to come on quickly, go off quickly, go in and out of wireless networks seamlessly. They're starting to expect that kind of behavior. This is becoming like a consumer device, like your stereo. And they're doing a lot in Vista to look at that. So they're doing a lot with power so that it goes off quickly and comes on quickly. They have this new hybrid sleep state that I'll talk about a little bit that allows everything to get saved down really quickly. Within, I think, under a second you can get back out and things like that. So they've had to make some changes. Developers are going to be impacted by this. You're not going to have tons of time to save off any data you need before it goes to sleep and things like that. And I'll get into that in some power. But it's interesting to think about when you're creating your application, does this work like a smartphone? Is my application as available and productive and online as it would be if I was just on a cell phone, a smartphone device? Because we're going to see that continuum just graying, especially with these smaller devices. And developers can create applications that work in that way. So, as I said, there's both challenges and opportunities. You are going on and offline constantly when you're walking around, when you're going into coffee shops, things like that. It's hard to stay connected. And a lot of applications aren't designed to have offline data. So you were really productive when you were online, and then you walked into another room and you lost connection. Suddenly you can't do any work on that application. Outlook is a great example of an application that you can stay very productive when you're offline. I don't know how many of you use offline. But if you have a laptop, you're probably using it. And you can go through all your mail, clean up your inbox, reply to emails. And then when you go online, that application will just figure out there's a connection and send all your email. So you're not really impacted as a user. You're staying as productive whether you have a network connection or you don't. So those are big challenges. And they get very complicated. How you synchronize data, how you create your offline cache is not simple. But there's great opportunities too. There's new growth, there's new scenarios. With pen and ink and tablets, you don't even need a flat surface to use these devices anymore. So the concept of sitting down and doing work is gone. I used to fly from Boston to New York City all the time, and it was just a race to get those cabs when everyone got off the plane. And people would have to crack open their laptops, find out their hotel information. I could use it on the fly. I was walking, and I had my computer and my pen, and I could find out all my information and slip in that cab. And there are there's field workers, sales. So there's many scenarios that are opened up when you think about tablets, ultra-mobile PCs, and just portable devices. So as I've been emphasizing, what makes a great mobile PC application? And these are kind of the features we look at. The tablet and touch technology. So using a finger input, a stylus input, pen and ink, open up a lot of new scenarios. Beyond, like I said, sitting at a desk near a flat surface with a keyboard, there's a lot more you can do. Form filling is great with tablets, things like that. Network awareness. So again, I realize I'm pushing on these points. There are 3 or 4 things you should leave with, and these are the features, that seamless connectivity, that cell phone-like connectivity with mobile PCs. Power awareness, so longer use. A lot of people look at the OS and think, well, it's all the OS's responsibility that this battery get better. It's, the hardware manufacturers. But there are things you can do as a developer to make your application run longer on battery. So I'll go into some of those today. We'll look at some code. And there are some things you can do that will just get more productivity, more time up on that laptop using that application. In data synchronization, we'll look at some of the sync center stuff built into Windows. And then we can talk about some scenarios that you can do beyond that, using SQL, SQL replication, things like that. And the lifestyle kind of ultra mobile PC features. So looking at tablet and touch technology, it's all about ink. Do many of you know tablet development, done any tablet development? Is this new? Okay, so a few. Nice. So the big thing with ink, it's very easy to collect ink. You can do that with WPF, the Windows Presentation Foundation, by just putting a little tag in your item and you're collecting ink. That digitizer is supporting that pen and ink is flowing in. And ink is a very rich data type. There's all sorts of other information around that ink, around pressure, even tilt, color, knows when it's hovering, things like that. There's a lot of data flowing through that stylus and that digitizer into your application. But you can go beyond that, and you can think about how you're going to manage that ink, how you're going to recognize that ink, store, transfer, things like that. And then when thinking about touch input, the big factor to think about is that this is a lot bigger input device than a stylus. So very small buttons, scroll bars, things like that may be inaccessible when your user is approaching it as a touch device. So think about that when you're designing your UI. Can your application be deployed on a touch device? And with Vista, it's going to support touch, motion computing. It's coming out with a device. All these UMPCs are touch. So it will be out there on devices. And you want your application not to work when it gets used on one of those devices. So if you think about that in design time, test time, you'll be ahead of the curve. All right, so let's look at some code. Let's look at what it takes to create a tablet application, tablet PC, tablet and touch technology, as they say. So I have a little sample here. I'll run it first. So this allows me to ink. And then it will recognize the ink. Can you see this little? So it said hello. It recognized hello. So pretty simple application, but really kind of the guts of tablet APIs. So let's take a look at what we were doing there. I'll stop debugging. And we will take a look at the code. And you're going to see it's pretty simple. I had that form that I just created in the designer. I had a group box. And then I created, so I have an ink overlay object, which is really the ink input, collecting ink object that does a lot of the work. And all you do is you just new that ink overlay, and you give it a handle to the parent control, which we're going to use as the group box. And then you enable this control. That's all it takes to start collecting ink on your application. So you can limit it to the parent control. You can have an area of your application that collects ink. You could do it to the parent control and have ink all over your application, depending on how you want to accept ink. And then here's the reco button. So all I do is I take that ink overlay. I look at the ink object within that ink overlay. I look at the strokes in that ink object. So ink contains a bunch of strokes. Every time you get a pen down, pen move, pen up is a stroke. And then I just convert that group of strokes to a string. That's all it takes to reco. It gets more complicated if you wanted to. There's a whole lattice of options of possible recos for that ink results. Hello is the first one, but there are maybe 10 others that I think it could be, thinks it could be. And we have great samples on our Dev Center that dive a lot deeper into this if you want to look more into ink reco. So that's all it takes to do, add some ink, pen and ink, digitizing, tablet technologies to your application. Pretty simple. It's a nice managed wrapper. How many of you are managed developers? A few. How many of you are developers? Okay. All right, so we have more like program managers, business decision makers, things like that. Okay. Well, the Ink API, we did a lot of work with a nice managed platform. We also have a COM-based platform as well, and with WPF, we have the Avalon or Windows Presentation Foundation. We are supported in that as well. So there are now 3 methods of getting ink in your application. So moving on to network awareness. So, there are some questions that you need to ask as a developer or your application should be thinking about. So, is there a network available? How fast is this network? Is this something I can send tons of data over, or should I pull back? And maybe wait until I get a stronger connection before I upload all my data. Again, Outlook, trust me, not all of Office applications are great role models, but Outlook really is in that it will download just headers, which is a nice way to, again, keep your user productive. You still have some information, but it's considering the fact that you might be on a dial-up network and that it's not going to download megabytes of data onto your machine and let you wait. So it does a really nice job of that. Am I connected to a safe network? So that's something else you might want to consider. Is this the right time to transmit this data? If it's work or secure data, you might want to wait until you're on the correct domain. And then what happens if the network goes away? What happens if it goes away in the middle of a write? What happens if I'm reading a file from a network? This is classic, and the user shuts down, and when they come up, that network's gone. Does my application go to start shoving up error messages and disturbing the user? And there's not much the user can do at that point. The network's gone. That file is no longer accessible. So a really great mobile PC application can handle that. It will know. It would have handled that on shutdown. It would have said, all right, this network file may not be there. I'm going to close the handle to it, clean up, and when they reopen, if it's available, I'll get it again. If not, I won't alert the user with all types of errors, even when they go on and off network. In and out of network connectivity, unless there's a question you really need to ask the user, there's no need to throw up dialogues. You should know what to do. Seamless connectivity is a much better experience for the end user, for your customer. So I kind of thought about like a scenario approach to this. So, allowing users to work when and where they want to. So again, some features that make this great would be like a zero configuration. Don't ask the user all sorts of questions. You should be able to make some intelligent choices around, is there a network available? Can you send data through it? Things like that. Equally productive on and offline. Something to think about in your application. And collaborate and share. Adding those features, realizing that there might be many users looking to collaborate. OneNote's collaboration features are great. They can make very productive meetings. You can all share notes, things like that. So to think about that in your application, can you add those kind of features and have confidence that your data is secure? So this is kind of a dev-focused talk, but we can bring it broader. So what can you think about as your application, as your customers might want? And again, it's that transparent detection and reaction to losing and gaining network connectivity. Handle abrupt network disconnections. It may happen in the middle of a file copy, things like that. You should be able to handle that. You should expect that. That should be in your test matrix of things you look at. You should be able to scale application features. If you have great network connectivity, go for it. Start sending all your information over, sync up with that database, things like that. If you don't, think about another scenario that may work, simpler, require less connectivity. Handle delays, things like that, and the ability to be used offline. I know it's hard with web pages. People always say, but I'm a web application, what can I do? And there are some scenarios that there's not a great offline user experience. But it's worth it to think about, is there an offline experience that you can enable for your users that will allow them to still use your application when they're on a plane, in a train, things like that. And clear feedback. So, sometimes we recommend, have a little network icon in your application that shows the user what's going on, if it's synced, if it has network connectivity, if it doesn't. And that's one scenario to add to your UI. There's also UI in the OS that they can use and see as well. So it might make sense to just rely on that. But it's pretty easy to add an icon and to reflect what's going on in the network state. So I have a quick little demo around network as well. We'll look at the code in that. So I'll run this first. It's not that exciting, but we'll take a look at what it's doing. So I have network connectivity now, but I will pull my plug. And we'll see the OS noted it. And then this should bubble up to my application. And it's saying the network connectivity has changed and that it's now down. So I no longer have network connectivity. I plug my tap back in. We'll let that trickle up through the system. And we'll see that the application noticed that change in network connectivity, knows it's up now and what the speed is. Pretty simple. This isn't huge, complex code to add to your application. It's very simple little things that really help you consider kind of mobile PC features. So let's look at what this code looks like. I'm actually using the system.net namespace and the network information class is all you need to get this kind of information. So it's already built into the .NET framework. And you just need to register for a network address change event. And your method will get called when there's a change in the network. And then I just say show network change. And I just create this network interface list. You can call it by just calling the network information network interface class, and then the get all network interfaces method will return to all the current networks available to this computer. And then you can just walk through that collection and see what's going on and compare it to the old. In this app, I can compare it to the old list, and I see if there's a change, and I notify the user of that. So the .NET framework has the classes you need to do this. If you're a C++ programmer, there's also the network location awareness APIs available in XP. They'll get you even deeper data around network awareness. And with Vista, they're starting the network location services. So they've somewhat simplified the COM interfaces available in XP. They think it's going to be a better user experience. They really looked at what feedback they were getting developers around the old APIs. They weren't used a lot in XP. So they looked at why that was, what the challenges were for developers, and they've really refined them in Vista. So if you are a developer and you install the Windows SDK, you'll look at the network location service APIs, and you'll see all the methods you need to find out what's going on with the network around your computer. All right, so we've looked at pen and ink, tablet and touch technologies and what those add to a mobile PC application. Then we looked at network awareness. And now one of the third features is power awareness. So this is huge. Living with batteries is a big scenario for the mobile user. And when that battery's dead, that machine now becomes a weight that you're carrying around. It's no longer useful to you, and the battery's dead, especially if you don't have a power cord, which unfortunately happens to us all more than we'd like to have happen. But sometimes I don't even have the confidence to go into a 1-hour meeting without my power cord. If I just feel like, oh, I don't know, my applications are really chugging battery, things like that. But we really want to get to 3 to 4 hours of confident, usable battery. And there are extended batteries, and you can get there. Some machines have up to 8. But they often look at like a full nursing shift as like the ultimate battery scenario, an 8-hour nursing shift. If they could do that on one of these UMPCs, then they'd feel like they hit battery nirvana. And they're looking at that, and we're growing to that. But it's not an easy scenario. It's not an easy challenge to fix. So as an application developer, you can change your behavior when you're on battery. Do you need all these graphics? Let's look at the next slide. I think goes into it a little more. So the scenario of maximum productivity on battery. So creating applications that are notified when you go from AC to DC power and react differently. So if you have a lot of graphics, for example, that are animating and running, and then you realize that you just got unplugged from the wall, can you scale back those graphics? Can you scale back that CPU usage? Do you need to hit the hard drive as much as you were hitting it when you were plugged in the wall? That will help get a lot longer life out of the battery while the user is using your application. And we're working on creating tools so end users can actually start to identify which applications are killing their batteries. So now it's a little bit of a free-for-all in that no one really knows who killed their batteries. So they're not really saying, oh, I don't really use that application when I'm on battery because it kills it immediately. But we're going to get more and more refined around that. So as an application developer, you might want to start to really shine and allow your users to be productive for as long as possible while using your application. So what you can do in your application. Well, like I said, you can be aware of power status. It's very easy to be notified when you're back on battery and to find out how much battery is left. If you're a CD-ROM writing application and someone tells you to burn a CD and you realize you have very little battery left, it might make sense to notify the user that this isn't going to happen. I'm not even going to try to write this CD. You're going to lose battery in the middle. It's not going to be a good user experience. What an intelligent notification to give to your user to say, you need more power to complete this task. It was a great thing for that application to consider before it did that task because it wasn't going to be able to complete that. It's very easy to add that functionality to your application. Keeping the computer awake when the CPU is idle, that's another big thing. You're not going to be able to do that in Vista. But in XP, the machine would try to go to sleep, and applications would veto it. They would say, no, you can't go to sleep now. I want to run, And they weren't really doing it with a lot of logic behind it. They weren't always really thinking, is there any reason why I need to prevent this computer from going to sleep? We looked. I need to get more into this. So with Windows Vista, they did a lot of research on this. Why were the machines not going into sleep state? And it was like 85, 90% where applications were vetoing it. Device drivers were vetoing it. It wasn't the OS. It was these other applications installed on top of the OS that were stopping this sleep state and creating a very aggravated customer. If you've ever gone on a plane and you shut that laptop and 4 hours later you get off and your bag is burning up and your computer's been on the whole time with an error message that says, do you want to save your file or something like that. It meant no harm, but it wasn't thinking about the fact that UI was not an option at this point. That computer was going into suspend state, sleep state. So since '98, we've had this on-now power management where you can shut that lid and the system will hibernate very quickly. It saves the information in this hybrid file, volatile RAM. So if your computer were to completely die, you lose that state. You can't get back into it. But in a normal scenario where your computer did go to sleep and was conserving battery, when you boot back up, All your files are open. Everything's just as you left it. It's a great user experience. But, every application is responsible for making that a success. No one can veto that as it's going to sleep. No one can be powering that back up for no reason and throwing dialogues and things like that. So everyone's responsible for making that a good user experience. So in Vista, they still have suspend and sleep, but they also have this hybrid sleep. So when you hit the power off button in Vista, it's going to go into hybrid sleep. It'll do it quickly. It's just going to go down quick. But it's actually doing both things. It's creating a standby file, but it's also writing one to hard drive. So if your computer completely dies, you're not going to lose that data. So there's a hybrid file now, so it will boot back up. This is going to be on desktops and laptops, so they're just thinking of energy conservation. So it's a whole new scenario. There are 3 power personalities now, so there may be many different power settings, but they're all going to be one of 3 things. You're either going to be asking for maximum performance, maximum power conservation, or automatic, which will determine if you're on. If you're plugged into the wall, it will get maximum performance. If you're not, it will start to conserve power. As I said, applications can no longer veto this. So if you're reflecting now on your software that your company runs or you created, and you think that you were relying on that veto, that your system is not going to work well if you shut down, then that's something you're going to want to look at before you're running on Vista, because you're not going to be able to veto that. You're not going to be able to rely on that anymore. And now you have only 2 seconds to respond. You used to have 20 seconds. They're cutting it down to 2 because they're looking at this consumer device-like behavior on these PCs, and they want it to go down quick and come up quick. In general, there's not much you have to do. Like I say, there's those hybrid files, and everything that's in RAM is getting saved, so you don't have to panic. You don't have to do everything in 2 seconds. But it's a lot like network awareness in that you do have to think about, files that were open on network devices or even on CD-ROMs, external devices, things like that. They might not be available. So you should do quick cleanup around that scenario. You should really just ask yourself, and you should test for, what if this is not the exact same when I come back up? But the RAM and things like that will be maintained by the system. So you don't have to do everything, but you do have to do some cleanup. So I have a little demo on this as well. So the thing with power is there's not much data you can get with the .NET framework around power. You can get, am I plugged in or am I not? But you can't get the details around how much power is left and things like that. So what we've done, we have a mobile PC development center, and we have all sorts of samples and white papers and hands-on labs to educate developers around how to create great power-aware applications. And we've created a little managed wrapper class that wraps all the Win32 Power APIs. So I'll just take a quick look through this class. You can download it from our dev center. You can reuse it in your applications. It's a nice, clean little wrapper. We've pulled in some of the structures and the classes from the Win32, the system power status, other enums, things like that. And then we're doing DLL imports on 2 methods, the set thread execution state. So that's how you can stop a device from going into sleep state if you need to. If someone's doing a PowerPoint presentation, for example, you don't want to go to sleep state there. And get system power status is how you query the current power status of that device. So as you can see, all we do when we want to retrieve the power status is we call that get system power status API. And we give it that power status structure to populate. And then we return the result. And we can see what we call this. And then we go through this structure. So battery time left, we just take the power status battery lifetime member, and we can convert it to seconds. I can just walk through the structure. You can find AC line status, battery life percentage, and battery lifetime. So that's really the bulk of data you need. So now if I run this application, I'm plugged in. So it says battery remaining 100% that I'm plugged in. And if I unplug it, it should update, but I may have to rerun this. So let's see when I rerun. Now it knows I'm running a battery, and it tells me my battery remaining. It's really easy to respond to that event, too. I'm sorry my sample's not doing it today, but it's very simple. So, and it's similar to network. It's like you find out the status, you get notified of change, and you respond accordingly. So the last thing we're going to look at is data synchronization. Again, it's all about productivity on a mobile PC, and data synchronization is key for that. You know, if you've ever tried to keep two machines in synchronization, it's not easy, and it can lead to a lot of unproductivity. You don't know which file is updated and which is new. We have a reference application on our Dev Center called Fabricam Fine Furniture that is a whole furniture store and delivery application. You should download it, check it out. So what that does is it has people in the furniture store taking orders, sales folks out there taking orders, and they put the order and delivery information into a database. And then the delivery guys, when they're online and connected, it will synchronize all the delivery data and store it locally on their machines in a local SQL database. Then they can go out into the road, do all their deliveries, take notes on what got delivered where. And then when they come back in and they get connectivity to that SQL server again, it will do SQL replication and synchronize that. And SQL is taking care of that back end. So it's a nice use of SQL and some of its data replication. So more available data is about seamlessly moving on and offline, keeping an offline version of your data. So, you know, from the very beginning of your architecture to consider both local and remote data. Is there information you can keep locally on the machine that will allow the user to be productive? Handling conflict resolution. Not an easy thing to handle when you have data changing on both ends. So you need to think about what your data is like. Can it change at both ends? What would be the best conflict resolution? Who trumps who when they're syncing data? Things like that. So you need to think all this through as you're architecting or designing your application, and you'll have a much more robust online-offline scenario for your user. You know, keeping them as productive, like I said, on airplanes, hotels, coffee shops. So there's Sync Manager in XP that really creates a nice UI for this. As I said, the scenario of how you're going to synchronize your data and deal with conflict resolution is not simple. So the OS doesn't offer you this. Unfortunately, it would be nice if there was a nice simple way to do it, but it's too complicated and it's too per application specific. But with Sync Center, you'll get a UI that is repeated through other applications the user is used to, knows how to work. It's most used for offline files and folders now and web pages, so it exists in XP. It's not used that much. It's not that discoverable. But people are using it for offline files and folders. Facilitates scheduling, things like that. Here's what it looks like. Does anyone use Sync Center, Sync Manager in XP? Okay, so a few people have. But when they worked on Vista, they recognized that not that many people were using it, and certainly developers weren't using it in their applications very often. So they really looked at what could be a more compelling scenario for the user. They looked at bringing all the devices in, and they created the Longhorn Sync Center, it's actually called now. Should have fixed this slide. And this is where they want all synchronization to happen in Vista. So whether it's your Pocket PC device, your cell phone, your applications, your offline folders, they want they all to list in this one interface. So as a user, when you go to unhook and undock, you'd go into Sync Center and tell it to synchronize all, and it would just get all your data and devices in sync. before you unplugged. Excuse me. It also, there's a conflict folder in here now, so you can go into all your conflicts will get reported up. And then as a user, you right-click and say resolve conflict. And developers, it's a COM interface. You'll get notified, conflict resolution method. You'll get what files were conflict, and then you can do your action. Again, even in Vista, this is just a UI. I need to be honest, it's not doing the complex synchronization behind the scenes. And that's because that's something that every application is unique, what you do there. I recommend SQL replication, but if you're not that complicated, perhaps you just need like a file sync, even a one-way sync. Maybe your application doesn't even really deal with conflicts. And that's very easy to program in then. There's not much you have to think about there. It's just the moving of files. Another way to think about data and synchronizing data and keeping up to date on your data with Vista is the Windows Sideshow devices. Has anyone heard of this? Seen one of these? We have them at our booth. We're in the Windows client area. It's orangey red, and we have a Sideshow device. Let me just check. Yeah. So this is what it looks like. It's a little display. It runs the tiny CLR. It's a self-encapsulated device. It has its own RAM, its own CPU, its own visual display. And it's based on the whole gadget metaphor. So if you've been reading up on Vista, you know we have gadgets now and the sidebar. The sidebar, I was confused, sidebar and sideshow. And Windows Live is now supporting gadgets. So there's APIs for transferring these gadgets to sideshow as well. And it's just a little cache bit of data. So the scenario we always say is you run to a meeting in another building. This is a big Microsoft employee scenario. I don't know if everyone experiences this, but you get to the other building, you pull out your laptop, or you get to the building and you realize you forgot what room it was in. So you don't really want to boot up your whole computer to figure out where the meeting is. So this will allow you to go into your calendar and just through the UIs of just the left-right menu buttons, get into that appointment information. We're seeing companies like eBay and things like that interested in this and wondering if there's a little trickle of information they can cache out to this device as well. Now, it's not always going to be on the lid of laptops either. So there are remote controls that are supporting this UI, or this API really. It's just as long as you can support the gadget XML and display and connect to a computer somehow, whether it's USB, infrared, Bluetooth. They're going to have them on keyboards, little displays that will send information out, things like that. And it can even run on a cell phone. It's the same display as a smartphone, so we have other demos where the phone is actually controlling the PowerPoint slide. It's pretty cool. So come by the booth and check this out. We also have a hands-on lab around how to create these gadgets, very easy APIs, and we have some devices out there you can play with as well. So the last thing I want to talk about in mobile PCs is the ultra mobile PC. This device was codenamed Origami and came out about a couple months ago. It's actually just started shipping within the last month. And the concept of this was to use really cheap components and make more affordable, little portable nth PCs, they call them. So they don't think this is going to be your only computer, but they think it would be a secondary computer you would have for different scenarios. So, I mean, the ultimate goal for this is to get it affordable enough that you throw this into your gym bag, you take it out on the treadmill or the Stairmaster is probably a better scenario, and you could browse the internet, play games, things like that. I unfortunately didn't get a projector, but you can come up and play with this after. The main thing with this is that it's 800 by 400. So this brings some challenges with it. Even Windows itself runs into some challenges with this resolution. They have software, they support other software resolutions, but natively it's 800 by 400, and that's all some devices will support. So you need to think about resizing dialogues, things you haven't thought about. I mean, 800 by 600 is pretty much the standard, and now we're switching that to a different resolution. So as an application developer, you need to consider that and say, you know, do I scale onto this device? Because it's running XP and it will be running Vista, so your application will run. But whether or not it's usable is something that you have to consider in design time and test of your application. And it also brings a bunch of new scenarios. We've had some ISVs think about creating media center remote controls with this. Games are huge, casual games. Education is very interested in this because at the price point, we're now looking around $900, but we're hoping to get it even less. They start to think about passing these out in classrooms and letting students collaborate. I don't know if you've seen any of the new stuff that's happening with education, but teachers can now get feedback real time if the class is syncing with what they're teaching. So they can talk about linked lists, and then they can have 5 or 6 of these out in the audience, and they can say, here's a quick quiz. They can send it out to these machines. They can get feedback, and they can say, all right, we missed something here. Let's go back. Let's talk about forward and reversing and all that. And they can get real-time data back. So it's great in the classroom. There's also new input devices. If you come up or if you go to the booth, they have this dial keys, which is the concept of using your thumb to type. So it's a whole new scenario. It's a whole new usage with this new form factor. So, and they call it a lifestyle application. The big test with this device that they always, we're always reflecting on is, would you go back to your house to grab this if you left it? And that's what they really want this device to be like a cell phone. Like when you leave the house and realize, oh, I forgot my UMPC, is it compelling enough that you would turn around and get it? And that's what we're hoping for, and that's what our goal is with these lifestyle applications. So it's interesting to think about what you're currently developing, what your current applications look like, and wonder, is there a lifestyle scenario that might be a good counterpart to my application, or is there a part, or can my application as a whole be used, while someone's watching their son's soccer game and they pull out this device? So it's a cool new scenario base that we need to think about. So I kind of just did the demo I was looking at. I really just recommend you come up and play with this or stop by the booth and check it out. Right now there's a Samsung and there's a tablet kiosk. But there will be other manufacturers coming out with them in the next few months. And with Vista, we should see even more devices. So the call to action. So my main message, I feel like I've repeated it a million times, but is really to think about mobile PC applications when you're designing, developing, and testing your application. So are your testers pulling out network taps? Are they unplugging laptops? Are they seeing the scenarios where the battery completely dies while running your application? It's a good question to ask your testers and to look at your test matrix and see if it's in there. In design time, are you bringing up these things? Are you looking at even security threat models? What happens if they go off a secure network? Things like that. So there's a lot of compelling scenarios you can look at in design time, in development time, in test time that will ensure that you have a great mobile PC application. Again, you're looking to keep this application. It's really about productivity, I think, and it's pretty simple. It's about making this more available in more places, more settings, more scenarios. And in some ways it's obvious. Like once you realize, oh yeah, I need to think about mobile PCs, it becomes obvious what you need to realize. But we can get very focused on the fact that our application will only be running in the scenario we initially considered, which would be a desktop with a network tap and a power supply. So it's very easy to get very focused on that and forget that as times are changing, there's a 50-50 chance that it's not going to run in that environment, and how is your application going to work in that scenario? So we have a developer center that focuses just on mobile PC development. We realized that these APIs are trickled throughout the whole Windows SDK. So we've kind of bubbled them up to our top on our developer center. And we have samples and white papers. We have a cool starter kit that you can load. And then in Visual Studio 2005, you just have to say File, New Project. And under starter kits, I don't know if you've played around with these before, but they're great. There's a mobile Ink to Do starter kit you can install from our dev center, and you just say OK. And it comes with a nice tutorial that will walk you through it. And this has power awareness, network awareness. It syncs up with a web service. So as you write notes, it syncs that with the web service, and then you can connect from another location, hit that web service. All your to-do notes will come over to that. It's a cute little application. It's very simple. You can look it over for half an hour, even 5 minutes. You just hit F5, it will execute and run. It's very cool. The whole starter kit scenario is very cool if you've downloaded other ones. It's a really nice quick start and new kind of tutorial approach with Visual Studio 2005. Also in our Dev Center, we have hands-on labs that you can download and do on your computer that walks through different mobile PC scenarios. We have actually all of our hands-on labs here at the conference. So if you go over to the developer hands-on labs, we have 7. We have creating those sideshow gadgets. You can go through creating power-aware applications, a few tablets, some advanced tablets, some basic tablet. We have a WPF hands-on lab that will show you how to ink in WPF. We're also having Chalk Talks over at the Windows client, so we'll be delving into some of these even deeper, and you can ask questions, answers, things like that. And we'll be giving away a UMPC a day. So we have these stickers. I don't know if you've seen them. I have a bunch up here if you want to grab any. If you get seen wearing the sticker once a day, we're going to find somebody wearing the sticker and give them a UMPC. It's a little origami crane bird. So if you cover yourself with these, you raise your chances of getting seen. And it's a great giveaway. If you fill out your evaluation center, your evaluation, sorry, you get to win an Xbox 360, the option of winning an Xbox 360. So there's motivation for filling out those evaluations. And that's about it. So if you have any questions, I have a bunch of hats up here, so I'd like to give them away. So if you have any questions, I'll give you a hat, or we can just do random hat things. But they're cute Vista hats. Yes?
One of the things that I've noticed in some of the mobile that the software doesn't handle well is when kind of going into sleep mode.
Mm-hmm.
I'm assuming that the network, the APIs that you have and such would also help when you're going along and you're just waiting for something and your handheld, whatever it might be, suddenly just says nothing's happening and goes into sleep mode.
Okay. So you're wondering, are there network APIs that can help that strange behavior when the device goes to sleep when you were actually waiting for some response from the network? So there certainly are things you can do. If you're in the middle of some critical network connectivity, data synchronization, you can suspend sleep. So there is an API, the set thread execution state, and you can tell it, while this flag is on, I don't want you to go to sleep. So you could get into that set thread execution state. You can wait till your behavior completes or your functionality is complete, and then you want to clear that flag so that the system is then capable of going to sleep again.
I thought you said, though, that the next operating system is not going to allow you to preempt it.
It's not going to allow you to veto it. So once it's going to sleep, you can't stop that system from going to sleep. Right. But you can put it in a state that basically says you can't idle out. So it's mainly for presentations, movie watching, things like that. So they do let you do that. And they emphasize you need to clear that flag when you're done. But once the system's hit idle and is going to sleep, you can't stop it.
When you're actually working with the network, or network,
You want to hand out hats? Yep. Sorry.
how do you know when you go out there and you find that you're reconnecting? How do you know that you're reconnecting to the one that you were connected with originally?
Well, you can store the network ID, and you can compare. So in the sample I had an old network list, and when I refreshed it, I went through the list and compared the two and saw if I was on a new network, my network had changed, things like that. So there's data associated with the network that you would have to cache and store if you wanted to compare when you got network connection, when you regained your network connection.
Because Wi-Fi scenario, you can go out there and have multiple IDs, right?
Yeah, exactly. and who knows what he's going to connect to next. Yes?
The ultra mobile devices, do they run full operating system, or do they run like a tablet operating system?
Well, that's a good question, because the first one emphasizes a tablet is a full operating system. So it's Windows XP Professional. It's the whole Windows XP Professional with additional features to support the digitizer. So these UMPCs run Windows XP Tablet PC Edition, but it's full XP Pro. It just supports the digitizer and the ink data type. And they'll support Vista as well. So it's great. Your application will run on this. And if you have it on USB keys or want to test it, you can stop by our booth and see how you do run on this small device. Yeah. Right. Yes. That's a good point. So he's talking about when resolutions rotate as well. With tablets, especially, well, the convertibles, but the slates do it as well. When you convert and close this into more of a slate mode, it's going to rotate and go from portrait to landscape, or landscape to portrait. And you need to think about if your application can handle that new resolution where it's now in portrait landscape. So it's something to test, it's something to think about, because you don't know if you're going to be deployed on a tablet. Our numbers are growing, and more manufacturers are coming out with tablets. So your chance that it run on a tablet is growing, and it's true. It's something to test and think about. Can your application scale and rotate? And often, if you create a nice scalable UI, it will run on this device as well. These do not rotate.
Are there more hats at the booth?
Yes. There are more hats at the booth. You didn't get a hat. Yes? Yeah. Currently, there aren't great tools for that. Intel has some tools. Intel has their whole mobilized software initiative, and if you go up to their website, you can download some of their tools. They have a nice battery tool that will allow you to check your battery consumption and change network and power. Yeah. That's on our list of stuff to get on our Dev Center. We agree. So, but no, there is the Perfmon will do some battery stuff as well, but no, there's not great simulation stuff. We just pull plugs and things like that, which isn't an optimal scenario. But any other questions? Yes? Yeah. Yeah. So what's the scenario? What application is downloading your documents onto another hard drive? Oh. Yeah. Oh, okay. Yes. Right. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know an answer to that. I know who I can check with, though, and I will ask. But is Vista more secure about the My Documents folder getting copied locally onto other hard drives? That's a good question. I don't know if they're... Yeah, I know. You get a UMPC for the unanswerable question. That would be fun, huh? Then a lot of people come to my talks.
I guess he's bringing up a general question of security. Synchronization.
Yep.
Is there a concept of security in synchronization?
Well, within the Sync Center in Vista, it actually doesn't do the synchronization behind the scenes. That would be for your application to do. So there's not much security, I mean, they're considering basic security, but I don't think they're considering security of your data because they're not doing the copying or the synchronization. So that would be another feature that you would have to consider when you're designing kind of your offline scenario. And you would need to think about, can this data get copied locally onto this machine? I mean, it's interesting to think with laptops. I don't know, the statistics are really crazy about how many get left in cabs in New York City a day. I think it's like, I think it's almost like 100. It's some crazy number that you almost can't believe. And when you think about your data being on those, it is something to consider. A nice secure offline scenario, whether it's a password-based or something like that. We're going to have BitLocker in Vista. I don't know if you've heard about this. But it's a somewhat scary concept that you can lock your whole, or basically encrypt your whole hard drive, and you need a key to decrypt that. So when you think about the worst case scenario, so I always think about my dad with all of his vacation photos losing that key, and suddenly something he really didn't even care about has destroyed his whole hard drive. So they're taking that very seriously with Vista, and they're thinking about some sort of key escrowing ability or something like that, because they realize that this is a very dangerous but important feature, and they realize its strength too. But it is needed. You need to encrypt that data in many scenarios. So that's BitLocker. That will come in the Ultimate SKU and the business, the professional SKU. Or it might just be the Ultimate SKU. They may have pushed it just up to Ultimate because they're a little nervous about it getting used wrong. Yeah? It is in the business SKUs? Oh, interesting. So he's saying that with domains, Active Directory is automatically escrowing your keys, so what the IT could help you out of a bind if you lose it. Yeah. So this will be interesting to watch. It might be a be careful what you wish for scenario, but I think we need it, especially with mobile PCs. Well, thank you very much. Come by the booth. Check out our hands-on labs. Do you have one more question? Oh, there's more hats, too, if you want them as you're leaving. Yeah, I have a few here, but you should go by the booth. We have tons. So, hey, Tina.